Namaskar, I am Ashish Bhadwaj, your host for the day. I am a DPS Mathur Road alumnus. I welcome you all to Alma Talks, which is an initiative of DPS Alumni Network. Today in this series, Phir bhi Dil hai Hindustani, our seventh talk show, which is being held on the eve of India's Independence Day. I am joined by Neelam Bedi Son, my co-host.
Hi, I'm Neelam Bedi Sohn. I'm a human resource trainer by profession. I have my working presence in Delhi and Dubai.
Before we proceed further, I would now like to play a brief message from Rajiv Soni, who is the conceptualizer of Alma Talks.
Greetings, all DPS alumni. India's Independence Day celebrations are being held globally, but in a muted fashion this year due to the ongoing pandemic. At Alma Talks today, besides the enjoyable talk with two DPS alumni separated by a generation and 13 hours on the globe, we put together a few lines from a song essentially emphasizing Phir bhi Dil hai Hindustani. Our participants from different countries in different continents in last 6 programs have collaborated and sung from the bottom of their hearts, and we are privileged to present it to you today. Happy Independence Day to all. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
मेरा जूता है जापानी, ये पतलून इंग्लिस्तानी, सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी। मेरा जूता है जापानी, पतलून इंग्लिस्तानी, सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी। निकल पड़े हैं खुली सड़क पर, निकल पड़े हैं खुली सड़क पर, अपना सीना ताने, अपना सीना ताने।
मंजिल कहाँ कहाँ रुकना है,
ऊपर वाला जाने, ऊपर वाला जाने।
बढ़ते जाए हम सैलानी, जैसे एक दरिया तूफानी,
सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी।
Hope you all liked.
No, I just want to say I love that.
Oh, thank you so much, ma'am. Rajiv, would you want to come and say something?
It was a pleasure getting everybody to sing a line or two. And yeah, so that's what the whole thing is all about. It's all a collaboration.
Independence Day definitely brings a lot of happiness and joy in our lives. I would now like to read a few lines by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. And Mother, I bow to thee, rich with thy hurrying streams, bright with thy orchard gleams, cool with thy winds of delight, dark fields waving, mother of might, mother free. I think this is just apt for the Republic, for the Independence Day that we will be celebrating tomorrow. And as Sharda ma'am said, you know, it should be country first. So we really look forward to that. And Neelam, would you want to come and say something?
First, heartiest congratulations for the Independence Day. Okay, and I will say something in Sanskrit. Vande Mataram, Shubhalam Shitalam, Malayaja Shitalam, Tasya Shamalam, Mataram, Vande Mataram.
Today, on this special Independence Day Eve program that we are holding, we would have a soulful talk with two DPS alumni, as has been already shared. They are, you know, on both sides of the globe. One is on the far west, the other is in east of India. So please welcome Miss Neeti Vermani an enterprising lady from the 1994 batch. She's currently in Seoul, Korea. And Mr. Ravinder Singh, who is a philanthropist, an academician, an author, a man who wears many hats. And he comes from the 1967 batch and is settled in Westville, Ohio. Welcome Neeti and welcome Ravinder ji. It's our pleasure to hold both of you here today. We would love to hear about your respective journeys. Let me first share a few snippets that we received from them. We have Neeti Vermani, who is a Delhi University graduate, and Ravinder Singh, again Delhi University graduate. Both of them come from the same college. Neeti is in Seoul and Ravinder ji is in Ohio. I'll share their snaps. So here is the little girl who right now is a charming young lady in front of us. Neeti from her school days. Typical gown holder you can make out. And that's the simple Neeti out here. This photo should definitely go into some memorial of DPS. It's from 1962. There's our cute little Ravinder ji. And this is how he looks now with his family around.
Hi, Ravinder.
Hello.
I start the program with you. You are a man of integrity and substance, a multi-dimensional, well-read, sharp, energetic, witty, and a multitasker. So tell me, Ravinder, after you left school in 1967, what was your professional and your personal journey?
I graduated in '67, went to college, as you just mentioned. And I have to tell you that studies was, well, not really a part of my, my system. I was more interested in playing games and wrestling at the time. And so my transition to the US was not at all motivated by any grand academic schemes or grand ambitions. It was just one of those things in life that happened. And what drove me to the US was not academia, was not anything but actually the girl next door. I didn't come here with any grand ambitions. My only ambition was to be with her. And then once I got here, and of course I had to be enrolled somewhere in order to keep my status. So I first joined the history department at the University of Rochester. And then I realized very soon that it would be very difficult to make a living, even though my heart was there. The other thing was that I couldn't quite figure out which area of, which discipline was really my interest. And I couldn't, at the time, I didn't really get the right advice. But nonetheless, I then skipped to the MBA program, which was quite a jump for me because I didn't have the necessary, as they said, quantitative background. So I said to them, I'm from DPS, try me. And I graduated with a degree in finance, and then you mentioned my corporate career, starting with IBM and then shifting to Lehman Brothers, and then coming to Columbus, Ohio. We moved here in '97, primarily because we had a 4-year-old girl at the time, and we were looking for a more civilized existence than the jungles of Manhattan. And Columbus was dull enough. You know, they actually, when I joined Chase here, they said, why do you want to leave New York and come here? And my response to them was, well, it's dull enough. My professional career has been primarily in IT service management. And so because I began with IBM, they trained me as a marketing rep, as a systems engineer. And so I got that technical background from them. And then I moved on to these other companies and stayed within that discipline for the rest of my professional career. So that was the technical dimension, but there was also a human dimension, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that later.
Yeah, Ravinder, that was also one of the reasons I was thinking that you have done, post-grad in history and then getting into MBA, which is totally a different subject.
I needed to make a living.
Yeah, that's nice.
And when I approached my then advisor in the history department, he was a historian, a very well-known historian in the US, by the way. So when I told him about my desire to go to the business school, he looked up, he looked at me, And he said, well, I think the business world needs some cultured people. That's how I landed up there.
Very nice. Niti, you are an accomplished business leader, okay, and a strategist, a versatile business performer having an outstanding track record across diverse sectors in telecom, FMCG, media, and entertainment. Okay, has worked for mass consumer focused brands. So perfect combination of beauty and brains, at present based in South Korea. So you stand together with other senior female leaders to provide an ecosystem for women to reach their full leadership potential. Niti, now my request to you is please share with us your journey, your professional journey, as well as your personal life. Thank you.
I'm Niti Virmani, and I'm from the 1994 batch. So my DPS journey began in 1981. I joined them, and being born in 76, so 81 and 94, and so at that time we had this grade called prep. There was no kindergarten, there was prep. So it started with prep till the 12th, and I do remember uh, we had these, like you saw in the pictures, the gown holder, the gown medalist, the gold medalist. There was something which at that time we used to be really, looking forward to, and we would fight for the grades for that. And yeah, so that's how life was. I remember being the house captain in class 12, and just like any other, lot of students at that time, the three important careers used to be engineering, medicine, and law. And with that perspective in mind, I also took science with biology in 11th, grade. And by the time I was in 11th end, 12th beginning, I completely dropped the idea of medicine, and I was very clear that I wanted to get into the corporate world. So I moved ahead with economics. With God's grace, got good grades to get into Delhi University, and then moved on to do MBA. Started working, and the time when I completed my MBA, it was the year 1999, and it was a very tough year because of the financial crisis, and getting placements was not easy. So I remember it was a very tough start of my career. And so I started with STG, and then moved on to Aptech, and around the same time, so it was 3 years into my career when this whole telecom thing was booming, and being in Delhi and seeing Airtel expand, I just wanted to be a part of it.
Right time, the right time, yeah.
So luckily at that time they had got pan India license for rollouts. So I still remember doing a lot of things to get into that organization, and finally, yes, moved there, and I got a role with Maharashtra Circle. So I had to move from Delhi to Maharashtra, which was such a big thing for my parents. But one thing which I wanted to highlight, my parents have always been self-made, and very independent, and that's how they made us. So from the very beginning, so yeah, I mean, I moved and spent 5 years with Airtel, moved back to Delhi with Airtel, and then I was supposed to get married in 2005, and my husband was in Bombay. So I had sort of no option, I would say, but to move to Bombay. And Airtel is such a strong organization when it comes to HR practices. So
correct.
I moved again, the third time with Airtel to Bombay. And so why I highlighted this to you was that if you will see my career, it's always been with a lot of changes. So first, very well settled in Delhi, and then I had to move to Bombay, and then we were there in Bombay for 10 years. Bombay was like a second home, and after 10 years, where I spent time with Airtel, Pepsi, and Aircel, grew in different roles so that they were amazing experiences. And then with Big FM, that was such a fabulous
Oh,
experience
wow,
because
wow, very nice.
that was the first time I got hold of programming, as an experience. And I did NCAD program for 1 year also, which was also part of my transformation journey of a different level. But then, this whole news came for South Korea. So that was another change for me. And, I have seen a lot of women somewhere, between marriages, kids, changes, movements, dropping their careers. So,
Right.
and that's something which, really breaks my heart, because somewhere down the line, they want to do it, but they are not able to do it, or it's a choice they make. So that's where this whole supporting women thing came in, and I strongly believe that along with the career and family, I feel both can be managed,
Of course.
if one wants to. So the whole journey from India to Korea got a little easy because of my time spent with NCR for 1 year. Because NCR had made us undergo a lot of changes in terms of how we can, manage ourselves better, so that we can manage our teams better. A lot of exposure to the international, way of working, and I think the mindsets were far more open when we came to Korea. We had always heard, the Korea assignments are the toughest. If one can survive in South Korea, one can survive anywhere.
Anywhere. Correct. 100%.
So, but when we came here, to be honest, I felt it was not that extreme. The country is beautiful. Yes, there are language barriers, like I was mentioning earlier, but there is a way to work around. So I immediately started working with a non-profit here, and I was luckily a part of their board. So I got hands-on experience on how to manage a board, because that's very different. It involves a lot of governance, and the good thing is that I got to understand the social fabric of Korea, because we implemented philanthropy projects across the education as a sector. And parallelly, I started learning the language. And within, I think, 2 to 3 years, I started also getting opportunities to work in the startup ecosystem. And that's something which came very naturally to me, because the entire life I had spent building businesses, transforming businesses. So I immediately, spent some time working around it, and I decided that this is the way forward for me. And with having spent a year in NCAD, which has a very strong department in entrepreneurship, I felt it'll be easier for me to have that network around. And from there on, it's been never looking back. And
Excellent.
yeah, so that's been the journey.
Now over to Ravinder. Ravinder, you were born in Singapore, then you came to India, joined school in 1960. Tell me something, Ravinder, the shuttling school from environment of Singapore and then coming to India in a different culture, different background. How did you cope up with it? And why you were in a convent school in Singapore and you opted for DPS? What was the reason?
No, I was actually born in Delhi and went to Singapore when I was about 6 months old. My father had a business in South Asia, and as was the custom, my mother actually came to India to actually deliver me. And so she stayed for 6 months, and then we went back to Singapore, where my dad was at the time. And when I was about 10 years old, my father decided that, I was probably turning into a brown sort of Englishman. I was just had no culturalization. I didn't speak Punjabi, Hindi, forget about that. And he was concerned. So he packed me off to Delhi to live with my grandparents. Now, at the time, I wasn't too happy. But as I look back today, I really do thank him, because I think that he exposed me. Had I not come to Delhi, a whole other universe would have been shut off from me. And that's the universe of Punjabi, Hindi, of the Indian systems. So how did I cope? At 10 years of age, coping, you don't really think about coping. You just get into the swing of things. My difficulty in school, throughout school, was was Hindi. And I remember Mrs. Tiwari, I can still hear the sound of a slap on my cheek for not being able to recite Kabir's dohas at the time. And now, of course, I can. And I remember her every time I read that doha, Lali Mere Lal Ki. And the only thing was my gal was got lal. But I want to tell you that I've lived in the US for 45 years now, 45, 46 years. I lived in Singapore for 10. So my period in India was just about 15 years, and most of them in DPS, despite the fact that I've been here for close to a half century. Those 10 years in DPS have really laid the foundation and shaped me. I mean, that has been the defining period of my life. Because, I marvel at the fact, I tell people here that I come from DPS and an excellent training ground. I said, look at me. I was the duffer in school. But despite that, I've been able to land on my feet. I've been able to find my place in the sun, and I'm doing all right. So I said, look at what an excellent place that was to produce duffers like me who can hold their own. And I also will tell you that DPS was where I met some of my most profound relationships, and met people who have lived with me up until this moment. So absolutely. Basically, I think what DPS has done, to me at least, is to be able to march to the tune of your own drummer, not to necessarily be a conformist, to be able to stand out. And that comes easy to a Sardar, to stand out. I mean, we just stand out naturally.
Okay, do you remember any Independence Day, celebration, during that time in school?
No. I will tell you what I do remember.
Yeah.
I remember, of course, I remember the Independence Day speeches and all that. But what I do remember more than the Independence Day is the Republic Day parade. Okay, so every January 26th, my dear friend Ashok Sardana, who's now in Dubai, he and I would make the trek all the way from East Patel Nagar to India Gate. We would walk. We would walk so that we could save money on the bus. And we saved that ticket money in order to be able to stop at Wenger's in Connaught Place on the way back and have a hamburger and coffee, which was like, I think, all of ₹2.50, but that was a lot of money for us. So I do remember for years going to the Republic Day parade and going through our ritual of stopping at Wenger's on the way back.
That was one thing which was rubbing me, that being a Singaporean and then coming to India, then coming from a convent background and getting into DPS, and then so the multitasking attitude came into you because of DPS.
Well, I'm not sure that I was multitasking. Actually, I've discovered late in life that our brains are not really wired for multitasking. That's why multitasking is one reason we never do anything well. Because we are scattered all over the place. But I have managed to sort of have my hands in both corporate life as well as my interest in my own faith tradition. So I've been a little fortunate in doing that. But that's because my faith tradition taught me not to get carried away by corporate culture. So I knew where to draw the boundaries, if you will. You know, you were speaking to Arvind Mahajan about work-life balance. And I will tell you that in my entire career, when my daughter was born, I made a promise to her that I would have dinner with her every day.
Oh, lovely.
And I kept that promise. So I kind of worked and lived on my own terms, if you will.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that speaks a lot about your personality traits, that you're a strong-headed and a very confident person. Niti, I would like to ask you a few questions on the women. My comparison about women is women are like tea bags. You only know how strong they are until they are put in the hot water. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I look at the situations from my life, you know, all these situations that I've been, I just threw myself into the situation, and you know, not being totally aware about the consequences, and then you know, being strong was the only option, and figuring out a way around was the only option, which I did. So whether it was initially building my career, or whether it was getting married and then changing cities, immediately changing, you know, houses, jobs, family. Um, so, you know, it's a completely different situation. And then juggling all of them, you know, a newly married life and job and a new city, because Delhi and Bombay are
Challenging. Yes.
really very different.
Very challenging.
Oh, I'm in love with Bombay today, but you know, the initial 8 months to 1 year is a very tough period
Very
for
difficult.
anybody who comes, you know, and similarly the other way around for any Bombay person to move to Delhi, it's tough. So I think you rightly said, you know, it's something which women, you know, when they just go out and put themselves into the situation, and how they are able to manage is when they get tested. And you know, all all said and done, we all know that how tough it is for women to really make a mark for themselves in the corporate world as well, as compared to, you know, men. So there itself as well, there is a big struggle. And the tea bag analogy that you've given, you know, gets tested very nicely there as
Very
well.
nicely. Yes, yes, yes.
So imagine home front, office front.
Do you remember any memories of the school, Independence Day, or any other
Yes,
strong memory you have?
yes, I remember a lot. So the first thing I remember about school is the morning prayer that we used to have, you know, a daily morning prayer in the school
Beautiful.
assembly.
True.
And we used to have this poem by Rabindranath Tagore, which I still remember, you know, where the mind is without fear and the head is held
Head is
high.
high.
So that's something which has stayed with me. And you know, it the whole flag, you know, being posted, and you know, that whole thing is still so fresh in my mind. You know, Independence Day for me is like, it's 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 a celebration of freedom, and it's a pride for me, you know. So yeah, I mean, though we are in South Korea, we are still very close to our roots, and that will never change.
Ravinder, you had a beautiful career, I would say, in the banking sector, and you did extremely well in the corporates. Now you have got into Sikh teaching, translating Gurbani. Please tell us the story behind this.
You know, when you cross cultural boundaries like I did, and you leave home, and the immigrant experience that you know, Niti and I have both gone through, perhaps mine has been a longer one. you have to remember that leaving your host, your mother country, leaving a familiar, there are a couple of things that happen. One is that there is a fracture. There is a laceration that you never quite heal throughout your life, because you are leaving behind a great deal of social, emotional capital. And you are coming to another culture that, despite the fact that we might have known a little bit about what America was like through comics and movies and so on, and even the language, nonetheless, it is an experience that continues for a lifetime. So for me, that experience continues. And because I was a Sikh who stood out, as I said, because of his turban, I was an easy target for people to ask questions about my faith, my religion, why I wore a turban. So I, of course, used that as an excuse to make friends, and sometimes girlfriends, because they were very curious. So I had a special sort of, affection for them when they came asking me about my turban. But what I discovered also was that I didn't really know a whole lot about the faith that I was born into. What little I knew came through cultural osmosis in India. And so I have to narrate this experience to you on how I got into this. In 1996, when I was living in New York, I was traveling back on the train to where I lived in Long Island, for those of you who are familiar with Long Island. And at the time, I did not wear a turban. I went through a 20-year phase where I actually cut my hair. So I didn't have a turban, but right across from me was seated a Sikh gentleman. And so I greeted him with a Sat Sri Akal. He looked at me. He figured out that he must be a Sikh. We got talking. And he said to me, it turned out that he was a professor of anatomy at the New York University Medical School. And he, it turned out, was a neighbor of mine. So we got talking, much older than me, a good 15 years older. And during the course of our conversation, he said to me, I've just published my first book of essays on Sikhi. And I had a very dim view of Sikh writers in English, especially. And I just said, yeah, I know everybody and his brother is really writing a book on Sikhi. And he was smarter than I thought. So he says, why don't you come home? I mean, since we were neighbors, he took me home, gave me a cup of tea and handed me his book. And he said, why don't you write a review? Why don't you review this for me for a publication? I was taken aback. I said, write a review? I had never strung a sentence together in English. I remember Mrs. Lumba always riding my back because I never finished my assignment. Good, yeah. And in school, I'll tell you that I was one of the few, obdurate Sardars who refused to speak English. It was always carrying on in Punjabi, just to defy the rules in school, right? And so when he said to me, why don't you write a review? And I said, heavens, I've never written a damn thing in my life. He says, why don't you give it a shot? I read the book. There were a series of short essays. I liked them. It was almost as if someone was revealing my own thoughts. And I wrote a review. He looked at the review. It was a one-page review. He looked at me and he said, why are you not writing? And I said, what do you mean, why are you not writing? He says, well, I can tell you, you do have a gift and you should actually develop this. And he took me under his wings and he started to encourage me to write joint reviews, joint essays that we would publish in various publications. And I still never really believed that I could actually write. It took years for me to come to the conclusion that, yeah, maybe I can string a sentence together, right? The other part of this was Gurbani itself. I had by this time spent a great deal of time, as I said, because people were asking me questions, to really delve deep into the Guru Granth Sahib. So what presented to me was a very rare opportunity. I found that I was one of the few Sikhs who had a handle on English and also a handle on the tradition. Because you either had people who could speak the English language and knew nothing about Gurbani, or you knew Gurbani and Punjabi and couldn't speak a word of English. So there was always this imbalance. And that's what got me started on this process. And this has been going on for a good 20 years. So now, you know, I mean, of course, by this time I'd gone back to my turban primarily because I felt an inner need to be a testimonial to my own faith. I felt that need. Nobody was telling me to go back. I mean, in fact, when I told my father, who was in his 80s then, कि मैं पग पान लगा, he started laughing. He said, "सोच समझ के पाई." Okay, there's no pressure to do it. So it is all inner driven. And I will tell you that for the last 20 years, this has become my passion. And in fact, I will also share with Niti, since she's in the corporate world, that this informed a lot of my management philosophy in my corporate career. I was always the odd man out talking about management in a particular style, in doing management differently, in pushing people. So I will tell you that I had some success with it in trying to bring the idea of what, and Niti will know this, you know, Peter Senge and company talking about the learning organization. Because what I found was that that is what Gurbani was teaching me, personal development models that we could apply in a corporate world. So there was a synergy that developed between the two. I could go to Guru Nanak and understand a development model that I said to me, holy cow, this is very applicable in the corporate world. This is what all of these MIT experts are talking about. Have they stolen from this Indian wisdom that we have? So that's how I got into this, and that's where I am right now, fully immersed in this.
Niti, women are the largest untapped talent in the world. One, do you agree with this? Second, that no one can make you feel inferior without your own consent. So in your corporate life, did you face these two you know, things?
Interesting questions, and it's something very close to my heart. So yes, you know, women are highly underutilized, and you know, all through my life, you know, when I was in India, I used to think, you know, oh this and oh that, and though I knew about a few things about the other countries, you know, South Korea being a highly developed country, a part of OECD, you know, group, one would think that, you know, anything to do with gender gap will not be an issue to that extent as the way it is in India. And believe you and me, you know, it was an eye opener how you know, India is far, far better when it comes to gender equality as compared to South Korea. You know, having women CEOs, women CFOs, women CXOs, women in decision-making roles largely, is something which needs to be really looked at very strongly. Yes, there have been a lot of improvements in the last 20, 30 years, you know, especially in India. I mean, today I feel, you know, very lucky to be from there and to have been able to get those opportunities, though the journey was not easy, which is, you know, which answers to your second part of the question. But you know, having seen the scenarios outside and especially here in the last 5 years, I really feel proud, you know, of the Indian women. The way they are, I mean, they are all there. Like, trust me, in Bombay, when I see, you know, an average lady, she gets up at 4 in the morning,
And
prepares the whole food, the whole breakfast, lunch, and leaves around 6:30 for her, you know, job. She takes a train.
Yeah.
Because the train takes at least about, average 30 minutes to 1 hour, sometimes 2 hours. And she has to reach her place of work, sometimes 8, 8:30, 9, and then comes back late in the night. So she juggles. So yes, and there have been a lot of situations, where, women are made to feel very inferior. And it's very important, I strongly feel the choice lies with us.
Yes.
And
Completely.
um, it's up to us how we want to feel or how we want to be made to feel. And, not giving up while maintaining your complete grace is what I always recommend young women, to look at.
Ravinderji, my question is for you. What were the challenges and struggles that you faced in a foreign land when you went to US, and how do you and your family coped up with it?
As I said earlier, the having to reconcile with the break. I can tell you from my personal experience, I still remember the flight, the first flight that I took from Delhi in August of 1975. During the flight, I recall actually mourning the loss of leaving my beloved Delhi behind. And in some very fundamental ways, I also lost the mourning. I mourned the loss of my relationship with my mother. It was almost as if I was mourning her. I mean, she's still alive, but I felt as though in some ways we had died to each other. And that is a very profound feeling to have. This was all, and yet there was this sense of anticipation because I was, as I said, I was looking forward to meeting up with somebody here. So it's a balance between the two. Then again, as Neeti just said, it is really up to the individual, and I think part of my personality is such that I really don't take myself or circumstances around me too seriously. This is something that I got from my father. He taught me how to laugh at at oneself. He ran a very large business, very successful businessman, but he never took himself too seriously. And I think I have gotten a little bit of that. So for me, nothing was worth really worrying about too much. The thing that was important was, and I want to bring this up, is what I have learned from my faith tradition is to first understand yourself, to be able to get a degree of awareness of yourself first. Because if you don't have that awareness, you are going to fumble around and you're not going to have clarity of vision of what it is that you want to do or what it is that where you should be going. In Hindi, it's called dubida.
Correct.
Okay, so the fundamental thing that you have to do is get in touch with yourself first. Now that I had learned from Gurbani. And then once you do that, then everything else falls in place. Okay, then you're approaching issues and stuff that is coming in challenges, not as, you're not personalizing them. People sort of get carried away because they personalize things that come in their way. Mere saath kyun ho raha hai? Why me? But in this case, you don't personalize them. You just view them as a situation to be dealt with. So I was fortunate enough to get this lesson from Gurbani, and I have tried to live it for the most part successfully. And as I said, learned to laugh at myself. Nothing is that serious, really. Come on, guys. I mean, I think we are just too as I said earlier, gambhir about ourselves.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I'll now come over to you, Neeti. From India to Korea, how was the transition, and how did you guys adjust to life there?
A lot of my batchmates, a lot of my friends, a lot of my other friends, from college, they left for US or for other countries or to settle abroad or study abroad. very early. So maybe they would have spent 20, 30 years already. With me, we were very comfortable. I was in a huge comfort zone in India, both professionally and personally. So luckily, studied in India and did well within the professional life. And we had a whole support system, like, in Bombay, we have our own place. And, we all know in India, it's far more easy to find support system. So to be honest, there was no pressing need for us to really, move from India to South Korea, because whoever has moved much earlier, mostly, I wouldn't like to label, but then mostly they move either to make their careers or make money, which was not the case with us when we moved 5 years back. So the reason primarily we moved was to really experiment with the new horizons, purely for new opportunities, which would throw open new perspectives. And that's exactly what happened. And at that time, it was a very difficult decision, especially for me, because while my husband got the opportunity to work in South Korea, I had to leave my entire, professional life back in India. And at that time, that's how it appeared to me. So, you know, maybe I think 3 years down the line, or now I would say 5 years down the line, I don't look at it that way. In the hindsight, I feel it was a very good decision because it helped us to, look at things in a very different perspective. There are values and beliefs which I think we were carrying and really didn't make any sense, and we could, part with them. Um, we could look at things from 30,000 feet level, and it gave us a lot of patience to deal with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, both in terms of personal and professional life. It allowed us to experiment. It allowed us to travel more, and I would have never perhaps looked at this direction. If I would have been in India, I would have been, just growing into the hierarchy, of the corporate world. Um, I think another thing, like I mentioned earlier, which uh, helped me to open up to this was the entire program that I did. I didn't do that program with the perspective of moving abroad. That was a very different plan actually when I was doing it, and there was no plan to come here. The whole plan actually developed towards the end of it, and it so happened the completion of that program and movement came together. So it was much easier. We didn't have any issues with food like a lot of people might have. We didn't. We loved to experiment, so we were very happy to get introduced to other cultures. Initially, the learning of the language was really a daunting task, but today I love it. Today I love Korean food, something which I couldn't even stand on the first day. The smell of the kimchi and bibimbap. And today, believe me, today when I in the morning when I sorry, in the night yesterday when I got food in the flight, I just loved it, and so did my husband. So I think on the hindsight, it's panned out to be really adding a lot of value to our lives. We've grown in different ways, and that's something which I appreciate. And this is something which I always believed in. What Steve Jobs said, that you can never join the dots looking forward. You can always join it when you look at things backwards. So yeah, I mean, I think it's always worked for me. But yeah, now I a lot of times I take life the way it comes, because whenever I've tried to plan it too much, it just goes haywire. So yeah, so to answer to your question,
Niti, my next question to you is of difference in living and working between India and Korea in your particular field.
It's completely opposite. Koreans, by nature, if you look at the working culture, they are highly efficient. They love to follow a time. That way they are very close to the way Germans also work. They're very particular about timings. They're very particular about completion of tasks, and they were very particular about following the method. So most of the times, the quality would therefore be very good. So when it comes to production, typically they are extremely good. There are cons to it, which I'll come to later. So in India, of course, people are very hardworking, and the good thing is that in India, people are high on creativity and innovation. So typical jugaad, what we call, is extremely high in Indians. I mean, we know we can do anything, if we get an idea. Now that's something which may not be, a very strong point with the Koreans. So for example, if you go to a Starbucks coffee, a very small, day-to-day example, and there is a set meal of a sandwich and a coffee, and if you want the coffee to be replaced by tea, they will not be able to do it. Whereas, so that kind of creativity, innovation, flexibility is not there over here. And now, I mean, that's something which, so everything has a pros and cons. And I typically feel, the efficiency of the Korean culture and the innovation of India can be a deadly combination along with technology. And so that's what I feel. Now, if we get into the working culture, at the organizations, that's a completely different topic. And there are a lot of hierarchies in the corporate sector in Korea, far more, and that way Indian system really scores high, really high. We don't really have that culture. We somewhat have a very mixed culture of American system and to a certain extent our own way of working in India. Which makes us not too much hierarchical, or not too much in terms of just looking at boss for everything. So yes, there are differences in the work culture. There are a lot of areas which one can appreciate, one can learn from, and if one has the mix of the best of the two, nothing like that.
Ravinderji, if you can also, enlighten us difference between living and working in India and US.
Before I go there, I mean, I just want to add to something that Niti said. We were talking about, how do you make cultural adjustments, and how she was talking about her, the expansion of her own individuality through different experiences. One of the things that one discovers as a I guess, boundary crosser is that your identity really is not singular. That really within you, you contain multiple identities. And I think the identity that is needed for a particular given moment surfaces at the time. And this is something to just bear in mind. So you could be, as a son, I might have one identity. As a boss, I might have another. As someone reporting to a boss, I might have another, so on and so forth. And the whole thing is quite fluid. These are not very fixed things. But having said that, and also the fact that I don't have firsthand experience working in India, but I did have experience coming to India on business, because I had teams working out in Bangalore and Chennai. So I used to come there quite frequently. And also in the US, on my team, we had a whole slew of Indians. If you're in the IT sector, I mean, that's all you see is young, bright Indian kids. What I noticed is something that Niti's already alluded to, is that when you compare it to the US, the Indian mind, and I guess this is true of our society, is definitely more hierarchical than the American system is. The other thing is that, broadly speaking, America is informed by this idea of American exceptionalism. The notion that America is different from other countries because it was founded on, not by any blood ties, but on an idea, the idea of freedom, justice. So that consciously or subconsciously, wittingly or otherwise, runs deep in the way people look at their culture, their organizations, and the way they work. Of course, there is also a very strong Protestant work ethic that underlies, the American system. It is also, as you know, very individualistic. There is a certain strain of individualism within the American system that you cannot possibly have in societies like India, where your personal identity is very defined by your social setting as well. You see, so you're not as mobile. Of course, things are changing, but nonetheless, these fundamental differences, remain intact. Somebody like me and others like me, coming from an Indian culture, I think are in many ways advantaged, not disadvantaged, because they bring with themselves the essence of a great culture, of a very deep culture.
True.
And a culture that knows how to deal with any situation that presents itself. So I think for the most part, we are very adaptive in that sense. But the boys and girls that have worked for me directly, whom I've observed, I will tell you, they have very strong engineering minds. They're extremely good problem solvers, but they are too deferential, in my view, to authority. So they will not, even if they could offer a solution, they would hold back. Something will hold them back. At least that's been my experience until I retired, that they would be reluctant to tell you that you are wrong. Whereas your American, employees have no compunction at all in telling you that you're really wrong. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So there is that deference to authority. There is that hierarchical thinking, but I think they are very, very good problem solvers, very intelligent.
Okay.
So now it's a very interesting round. I start with Niti. It's a rapid fire round, Niti. You believe in a women of substance or women of influence and power?
Women of substance.
Okay, women is incomplete without a man. That is, a queen is without a king, right? Is she turns out to be weak or powerful?
I would say weak. Women are not incomplete without men, but I would say that at the same time, they can complement each other very well. So as long as they're equal, it's good. The moment one is inferior, it's not just about women, I would say. If the men feel inferior, it's not a right combination.
Women is the enemy of other women, or women can be compatible and best friends.
They can be compatible as friends.
Okay, great. Now, women have in them the inner strength to bounce back in difficult times if put to test.
Absolutely.
Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Most of the women in the world are untapped talent. Do you agree or not?
I mentioned earlier also, it's so highly untapped, and I don't know how many years it will take, maybe 100 or more. I mean, 50% of the world population is untapped. And there is so much efficiency that lies there. There's so much of creativity lies there, and if there are more females in, different roles, they can get in such brilliant and beautiful perspectives, so much of creativity, so much of innovation can come in, which is lacking right now.
Will you recommend girls to study in DPS even today?
Absolutely.
Ravinder, do you believe in a philosophy to teach a child from birth, or the child automatically learns from the environment he's interested in?
Automatically learns.
Oh, nice. Reading and watching Bollywood updates and movies. You like that, or you like to read, Sikh books, Sikh religion, literature, and research?
Both. I just enjoy both. I mean, I watch Hindi films. I sing Hindi songs. I sing. I mean, I just like music. So, and I make no distinction.
Nice, good. Now, is guru required for learning? Do you prefer to have a guru in India or abroad?
I am my own guru.
Excellent.
The guru is within.
Excellent. So you don't need a guru to learn.
That's what I've learned from my faith tradition. The guru is inside of you. Find that.
Excellent, excellent. Life is man-made or God-made?
There's no distinction between man-made and God-made.
So do you believe in yourself, or you rely on others for opinions?
I self-assured.
This finishes the rapid fire round. Ravinder, I have to ask you one very important question. Can you explain this "Sawa lakh se ek ladaun"? First, the meaning of this, and what is the significance behind this?
The line that you are quoting is, just for those who don't know, just a little background. It is from a document that is called the Zafarnama, and it's attributed to Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru of the Sikhs. And it was written in response to a broken agreement between him and the Emperor Aurangzeb. Okay, so that's the background. Zafarnama means the epistle of victory. This is actually a declaration of victory. So this was written to and addressed to Aurangzeb, who was in the south, in the Deccan at the time. So that's one thing about where the line is from, the context. Then the other thing that we have to remember is the circumstances under which it was written. So there was an agreement signed between the emperor and Guru Gobind Singh that assured him safe passage out of Anandpur Sahib, which is where he was, at the fort of Anandpur in the Punjab, near Chandigarh. And the reason Guru Gobind Singh was being hounded out of that area was there was a fear, a political fear amongst the hill Rajas, the Himachal Rajas, that Guru Gobind Singh was asserting his political ambitions and that he was getting very popular, powerful. He was a threat to them. And so along with the governor of Sirhind and with the blessings of Aurangzeb, they worked out a treaty that said, we will assure you safe passage out of there, and which Guru Gobind Singh believed. But when he moved out of there with his family, they were attacked by the Mughal forces. And he fought 2 battles, which he's recorded in his own compositions, and killed a couple of Mughal generals in a hand-to-hand combat. But the fact of the matter is that when they were crossing the river, I believe it was the Beas, I could be wrong, but they were crossing a river, and he, in the melee that followed, was separated from his family, from his 2 of his children, 4 sons, and he was literally chased and hounded out of there by Mughal patrols. And so when he wrote this Zafarnama, I want you to know, here's a man who has lost everything, practically. 2 of his sons, he doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know where his mother is. He's hiding in the jungles of Machiwada around Ludhiana, trying to stay afloat, trying to stay one step ahead of the Mughal forces, along with the other forces chasing. He writes the Zafarnama to Aurangzeb, directly addresses the emperor. And in there, he says, Sawa lakh se ek ladau, tabe Gobind Singh naam kahan. Okay. Yes. So it dawa karna hai, see, ki mera naam Gobind Singh nahi hai.
Yes.
If I don't turn sparrows into hawks, and if one is not the equal of 100,000, you see, that was an assertion. But I think the lesson for us in this is, it is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for us to do the impossible, that nothing is beyond reach. So exceed yourself, okay? That's the message for us. That's one. The other message for us is, don't be afraid to speak power to the truth, speak truth to power. You should be able to speak truth to the rulers of the time. And he got this lesson from Guru Nanak, who spoke up and documented human rights abuses against women at his 550 years ago. So that's where this line comes from. The Zafarnama is a very interesting document if you are interested, because it not only is a lesson in what a person should be able to do, but also a lesson in diplomacy and polity, how to actually run a state.
Okay, Niti, could you throw light on your Power Women of India?
So it's a group of women, who've come together. It was actually founded by Simran, who's based out of Dubai, and she's an Indian living in Dubai, and she started a few years back, and she got together the women who are in various fields, working together to basically build a platform, where they can support each other and support the women who really want to, harness their potential, and especially, like I said earlier, in the leadership roles, in the roles which are decision making roles, and there are almost, I think, 500 plus members now, and this is a group which really, like you said, you talk about women empowerment. It provides that ecosystem where women can represent themselves, where women can speak out their mind, and yeah, so it's a base which is helping every woman to every woman to do what they want to do in a positive way.
Very nice, Niti.
My question to you, Ravinderji, as a first generation migrant, how often do you travel back to India? And once here, how do you spend time here?
Up until my parents were alive, I traveled back every year without fail, and essentially spent time with them. I didn't quite catch up with people, or because my parents would complain. My father would say, "ये तो धोखेबाजी है, कि मिलने हमें आया है और समय अपना दोस्तों के साथ गुजार रहा है." So I made it a point not to really go anywhere. So that was till 97. Then there was a lull after that for a few years. And then in the past 10 years or so, I've picked up my travels again, but this time because I have two elderly sisters in Pune, both of them in Pune, and they're in their 80s. And one lives by herself, with a maid, of course. So I get back at least twice or thrice a year. I was planning to be there in March, but thanks to the coronavirus, had to sort of change plans.
Same question to you, Niti. How often do you travel to India? And what do you do when you are here?
So I travel at least, twice in a year. I mean, on average, sometimes it can be thrice, but on an average, I would say at least twice. And, in that period, I try to spend maximum time with my family. So that includes my parents and extended, family, because that's become, year on year, it's becoming highly precious. And of course, whatever little time I get, I try to spend with family, and also I work. My work also is there in India, so I spend some time on that as well. But honestly, maximum time goes with family.
Okay. Next question to you, Niti. How do you celebrate major Indian festivals in Korea?
So we have a very good amount of Indian diaspora out here. As compared to what people might think in India, uh, there's a whole lot of Indian community which is there. People working with Samsung, people working with other Korean organizations, the students who are here to study, a lot of professors, people who are doing PhDs. So we have this very nice community, and we've got our own set of friends with whom we celebrate each and every um, festival, and especially the big ones, the Diwali and even Karwa Chauth. So yeah, and I think to be honest, once we moved out of India, I think the appreciation for festivals, the appreciation for a lot of things that are Indian actually went up. And yeah, so and in fact we are pretty much close to the community at the embassy also. So tomorrow the embassy is doing a web meeting, or web celebration, and we plan to be a part of it. So yeah, so nothing changes, nothing changes. I'm still first thing in the morning, I look at the Indian news. I am pretty much connected with the startup world. I'm pretty much connected back with people in the corporate sector as well. So nothing changes on that front, really, to be honest.
Okay, that's good to know. Ravinderji, how do you celebrate major Indian festivals?
To be quite honest with you, the situation is somewhat similar to what Neeti described. There is a large Indian presence here. And so Diwali and, Gurpurabs and so on and so forth get celebrated. We even celebrate Christmas. My personal interest in all of this is really the food more than anything else. So that's being honest.
Clearly defined.
Yeah, I mean, I go along for the food. I have very little interest in the actual activities.
Ravinderji, to you, can you give us 2 instances where you can see your dil is still Hindustani?
Well, I mean, I speak the language, I eat the food, and you have to remember, just like we have biological DNA, we also have a cultural DNA. And you don't change that. So, I've grown up in, spent years in India, I come from an Indian background. Even if I wanted to, I can't see myself stepping out of that. So in that sense, you always remain, a Hindustani.
Okay, perfect. How about you, Neeti? 2 instances where you can, say your dil is still Hindustani. It still beats for India.
Oh, not just two instances. I think it's there's so many instances to quote for telling you that yes, फिर भी दिल है Hindustani, and I don't even want to prove it because it's there. I mean, there's nothing non-Indian about any of the things. I'm very proud about it, whether it's to do with food, whether it's to do with festivals, culture. Yes, what I would say is, it's tough to now actually call any place as home. When we go to India, we go to Delhi, we go to Bombay, and in the last 5 months, sorry, that we were in India, we really missed Korea. So it's tough to really call one place as home. When we are here, we miss India. When we are in India, we miss Korea. So I think we've tried to imbibe the good things or the good values of various cultures, and a lot of our generation's kids now, they're like typically called the third generation, and they're like global citizens in future. So that's the future. It's tough to really belong to one place, but yes, फिर भी दिल है Hindustani. At the core, you're in India.
Okay, perfect. My next question to you again, Neeti. Just tell me the year. When was the last time you visited DPS?
12th December 2019.
Okay.
We celebrated our 25th anniversary. So we completed 25th year of graduating. And trust me, there were batchmates who had come only for 2 days just for the reunion, all the way from US. So it was
That
such
was
a
a very
pleasant time.
nostalgic memory just recently.
We were close to, I think, 200 odd people, which was a great attendance. So, yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. How about you, Ravinderji?
I can't remember. That's the honest truth. I think it was a long, long time ago. I mean, you're talking about over 50 years here. I don't remember when I last went there. I have some faint recollections of a dip site affair, which was soon after we graduated. So it's a safe bet to say that I haven't been there at least since 1969 or 70. It is indeed a long time. Although I will tell you that I have actually driven past the school many a time.
What would be your message to the DPS alumni community?
What I would say to them is, as dip sites, think about the motto of the school: service before self. And I will tell you that when I delved into Guru Nanak, I found that that was his motto as well. And there are three important words here: self, others, and before. I would just modify that to say that there is no other. And the way that you will discover that there is no other is that if you develop an awareness of your own self. That's what I would say to them.
That's very beautifully summarized, sir, I must say. Neeti, what would be your message to the DPS alumni community?
I think the foremost thing is that studying or being in DPS itself is a big thing. It's like a blessing. It's very fortunate to be in such a school which gives you a whole lot of rounded, makes a rounded personality. It gives so much confidence to really get out in that world and make something out of life. And I've seen that with most of my batchmates. Wherever they'll go, they'll do something. So I think that itself is such a big fortune. And I think living with the whole thing as in a responsible fashion is something which I would recommend. And just carrying the flag high, the motto high is what I would recommend to the young girls and boys over there.
So I must say both of you have in your own words said the same thing. Keep up the motto of the school, service before self. Remember that. And I'm sure we all would agree to that. So thank you, Ravinderji. Thank you, Neeti, for taking time out and talking to us and sharing your incredible journey. It was wonderful to know about it, and I'm sure it will benefit a lot of websites.
One of the probably what happened in 1947 has really changed my life, because I was just 15, the head girl of the school, when the principal, who was Mr. Titler, came to me and said, I want you to hoist the flag and the speech in independence.
Wow.
And I was so taken aback and so moved, because it was a great moment for me.
Beautiful.
And we were a small group. We were barely 300 students, I think. But I spent the night typing out, composing a speech, typing out a speech with 2 fingers on my father's typewriter. I still have that piece of paper. I'd folded it and unfolded it so many times with nervous fingers. It's all crushed. But I smoothed it out and laminated and kept it to remind me that it was probably the greatest moment of my life, to have been able to make the very first speech I ever made. And the other most important thing was, one of my mother's relatives was a member of the Constituent Assembly. And he comes to our house every day. And I was very excited to hear about the Constituent Assembly and the making of the Constitution. And I used to ask him a lot of questions. And he taught me probably more about politics and the making of the Constitution than anybody else has ever done. And he said to me, "You're so interested, do you want to come to the midnight session?" So I was stunned. I said, "You mean I can?" He said, "Of course." So he got me a pass. So I was the only minor, I guess, in the assembly hall in Parliament House that day at the midnight session, way up in the gallery.
Wow.
And I was there to hear Pandit Nehru make his famous Tryst with Destiny speech. And every year it's broadcast on All India Radio, and I listen, because at the end of it all, you can hear everybody shouting Jai Hind, and I also got up and shouted, you know. It just makes my skin prickle. And I think what the kind of patriotism that it gave me at that point has lasted me all my life. So I've been an optimist about the country. You hear a lot of people sitting and criticizing what has happened over the years. But yes, people have changed, politics have changed. We do not have the same kind of people who are our freedom fighters.
Correct.
They were really selfless. They had no money, they spent their years in jail, and they gave us our independence. And I think we've forgotten them. We've now become more,
Yes.
we've taken our freedom for granted. But I haven't, because I went through that whole thing, you know. The fight for freedom. Many of my friends, fathers and parents, relatives were in jail. And, you know, it is quite a moment to remember. And I wish I had the courage and I was old enough to participate.
I am Aditi Mishra. I am from DPS Arkepuram, a batch of 1979. Hi. I've been with DPS for 35 years now as a teacher, as a head of department, and now as principal for the past 2 decades. I'm very proud to be a Dipsite. And I challenge the world when they argue with me about DPS, that I said DPS is in my veins as a student, teacher, and now as a head. So the heart beats for DPS. I was listening to both Ravinderji and Neeti, and I agree with you that the world is so much closer now. There are no borders. We are global citizens. I don't want to think that my family is British and I'm Indian and my friends are American. I think just the citizenship of humanity is more than enough for all of us.
Sanjeev Bhavnani, again, Aditi's batch. I think sounds better that way, now that you know who she is and you can see her. DPS Arkepuram, 1979. Around by the name of Mentorpreneur, that's how I'm known in the industry. I have a group of companies under Mentorpreneur, which are into venture capital, incubation, technology incubation, also mentoring, right? We unfortunately missed out another 3 of my batchmates who had joined in the interim. Ronnie Bindra from Chicago being one of them, managing director of Deloitte Digital. He is based out of Chicago. We had Ajay Kamath, who had joined briefly, possibly realized that nobody noticed him and decided to edge out. He's based out of Dubai. And he's also into HR and HR consulting and education. We had Vikram Pandya joining us from somewhere in Gujarat. I know he's from Modiland.
Baroda.
Baroda, okay. So he had also joined in for a while.
We also have Sanjeev, a student of mine, Dakshayani Saxena.
I'm a lawyer. I practice in Delhi. And I passed out, I think, back in 2011.
I just thought that there were so many different angles about the juta being from one country and the hat being from another country, but the heart still, beats for India. So that's it. That's what made me think about it. And then it was a little bit of a challenge because the 18 participants who have gone in the last, so I had to only take the first 18 lines to share with everybody that I've been trying to request Neeti to help me in an initiative where we are trying to set up, but I'm trying to set up with a lot of other people, or, to have a platform where we have younger DPS alumni come up with some brilliant ideas, and we can look at older DPS alumni wanting to fund those ideas, as an angel, or so that, there is a net result, which is a plus for India per se. And I am happy to intern under Niti ji on this. You know, there's no question of this initiative not coming up without her. It has to come with her. She has to lead it, and so that's the point I wanted to make.
Tomorrow is the Independence Day of Korea also. So
Oh,
Wow.
yeah, so that's another similarity, you know, and just
excellent.
like Indians, Koreans are they just love their country, and you know, the good thing about the Independence Day being on the same was also, you know, helped us always reconnect with the Independence Day far more easier. And yeah, so I just thought I'll highlight.
Very happy Independence Day to all of you.
Happy Independence
And to
Day.
you all.
Thank you.
All I want to remind you is that your country comes first. Please remember that.
All
Not your own selfish interests.
Jai Hind.
Jai
Oh,
Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Right. So on that note, I thank you all for taking your time out and joining us this evening. I thank you all and Jai Hind to you all.